Hi everyone. Some of you may remember that I recently purchased this book from a second-hand bookshop in Plymouth, and I've recently just finished reading it. I was intending just to keep it as a sort of source of reference material, but it turned out to be a really cracking read. It's written in a very kind of dry academic style, but all the same, it's packed full of interesting facts. Being a history of the Southwest up to the year 1000, it has to rely a lot on archaeology, various finds, that kind of thing, rather than on written sources. But I found it really interesting for a number of reasons. One is that, as you're probably aware, I enjoy exploring Dartmoor, and Dartmoor is the best area in the UK really for prehistoric and Bronze Age remains, and it mentions so many of those places that I'm familiar with in this book that it just sparked my interest that way. But also of interest is the fact that I actually live in Plymouth, and I was absolutely amazed at the number of artefacts that have been unearthed just in my local area. For instance, a cave that is now buried beneath houses and so on, that is in Stonehouse, where they found Neolithic flints, arrowheads, that kind of thing. And more particularly, there's an area of Plymouth just on the other side of the Plym called Mount Batten, and that neighbours another area called Plymstock. And in that particular area there are lots of remains from pre-Roman and Roman settlement on the side of the river there at Mount Batten, at a place called Stamford Hill, and that was all unearthed when a fort was put there in the 1860s, one of the Palmerston forts. So there's probably a lot still left underneath that area. And in Plymstock as well, lots of finds there. And one that drew my attention, in the southwest there are a lot of these what are called Cornish crosses. Some more examples on the next page, which date from the pre-Saxon and Saxon eras, so they're very similar to the kind of things that also crop up in Ireland in particular. So they date from the Dark Ages. The later ones could be 10th century, possibly 11th. But there's actually the only Cornish cross east of the Tamar, so in other words the only one that's not in Cornwall itself, is actually in Plymstock, and it's still there. It was found, I believe, in I think it says somewhere 1846, and it was moved to the side of the road, but it's still there. A friend of mine, I've never noticed it because I don't think I go down that road particularly often, but a friend of mine says it's right beside the bus stop in the grounds of an old telephone exchange. So I thought I might go over and take a look at it. I've found a little bit more about it on the internet as well. There's an archaeologist called Rosemary Cramp who wrote a very comprehensive book about Anglo-Saxon sculpture, and there's a page, you can actually read the page on the internet, so you don't have to buy the book, which is just as well because it costs about 500 quid. So it's pinkish grey granite, typical of the kind of granite that you do find on Dartmoor. One arm of the crosshead is missing, head and shaft carved from a single block of stone. Um, One of the most notable things about it is that at the base of the shaft are four letters, and they're very worn. It is difficult to decipher them, but they are most probably ELEF followed by a rune, and the rune is the syllable win. So her best interpretation is that it's the name Elowyn, or possibly Athelwyn, which would have been the person that was being commemorated. Now, whether that was inscribed on the cross later than the actual sculpting of the cross or not is not clear, but it puts the date of the cross way back in the sort of 10th century at the very latest, which means this cross is over 1,000 years old, and it's just planted in a patch of grass beside the road for everyone to see and to look at. And according to a friend of mine, it's quite unremarkable. It's just left there unnoticed. But as I say, I thought I'd go over and just take some film of it and post it up on YouTube for people to see. So I think it's just remarkable the number of things that are all around us that you see, and it's evidence of the past. In this particular case, as I say, 1,000 years old, and I just like that sort of thing. So I'm going to wander over there now, and then I'll show you what I get in terms of footage. I think that building up there is the telephone exchange, so it should be in the grounds of that. Right, well, there we are. Just got back, and I thought that was worth visiting. A few things about it, though. The inscription on it has virtually disappeared now. So I think when it was interpreted as being a horizontal, or rather a vertical line of E-L-E and then the rune, that was between two pairs of horizontal lines, and that has all virtually disappeared. And also the lettering was quite close to the ground, quite close to the bottom of the shaft, and I thought that the cross was a bit smaller than I was expecting it to be. So there's a suggestion that there is another remnant of the cross still buried in the ground around there, the sort of base of it, and it had snapped off as it fell. So originally it would have been a lot taller. Excuse me. What else? Yes, I said 1846, and in fact I just looked it up again on the internet, and it was 1946 that it was uncovered in the grounds of a house called Stentaway House, which that road that it's on is called Stentaway Drive, so it must be very close to there. But I was 100 years out with that. And I forgot to mention this book that I noticed it first in. I got it second hand, and clearly, I don't know if you can see that, but clearly a previous owner of the book must have lived in Plymouth and been interested in it as well, because they have written in the margin in pencil, near Fairways, which is the furniture store that's on the main road, and it's situated just behind that. Yeah, and the lettering as well. So the date, what's the date of it? It's a bit of a puzzle. The way that the archaeologist described the horizontal and vertical lines of the lettering joining was very much in the manner of crosses that have been found in Gaul, dating from the 6th to the 8th centuries. So that would put it way back in the early Anglo-Saxon period, and at that time this part of the countryside was still under the control of the British tribes, or the British population, the Celtic part of the population, and the Anglo-Saxons hadn't actually pushed their way this far. Wessex was only brought up to the border of Devon and Cornwall in the time of Athelstan, which is the 10th century. But it's confused by the fact that that final character has been interpreted as being a rune, which reads as the syllable win. And if that were the case, that is more appropriate for the late Anglo-Saxon period, or even the 11th century, so sometime around the Norman conquest. So it's still a bit of a puzzle. I think in a way it's a shame that it's been left out in the open like that, because it's weathering at a rate of knots now, and it certainly won't be there in another 1,000 years, probably not in another 100, because it's just being eroded by wind and rain. So really it's interesting that museums just haven't got the floor capacity, the space to store these things, but I think it should be at least under a roof now, indoors in some way. Maybe have some kind of structure built over it to protect it. So it's nice that it's still in its original location, more or less, but at the same time worrying that it's just not going to survive much longer. So just thought I'd show you that. I think I was interested to go and have a look at it, and it was an excuse to stretch my legs. It's quite a nice winter's day, nice, the sun's out though, so it's quite a pleasant stroll over there. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you again on the next video. Bye for now.